Hey class, this is going to be an overview for lesson 14. This is just how to understand the different types of angles that happen when a transversal cuts a parallel. One angle is supplementary. These angles we learned last year in 7th grade, but supplementary is made up of a straight line. This straight line right here equals 180. So the two angles that are adjacent, meaning side by side, will add up to 180. 120 plus 60 is 180, and it's usually made up of a straight line. Complementary angles is a review as well. It's two angles that add up to 90 degrees. We won't see these as much on our different types of angles when we have a transversal, but we want to make sure we understand that they're 90 degrees. Complementary angles, yes, it could be a 90-degree angle, but two angles added up to create 90 degrees. Adjacent, as I've been saying, it just means side by side, okay? Two angles that are right next to each other. And vertical angles is when two lines intersect that make congruent angles from across from each other. You can see that these two are equal because they're across and they are vertical. So one thing we did in class is we practiced. I would like you to try and practice on the piece of paper. You can pause as you go on, but we're remembering that 80 degrees, 180 is made up of a straight line. 90 is when you see the L shape. And vertical angles is when they're across from each other, they are congruent. They're the same measurement. So let's go ahead and look here. Well, if I look across, 45 will go here and the question mark will go here. So I'm not looking for that. Well, it's on a straight line, so it's 180 degrees. So if I subtract 45 from 180, I should get 135. Okay, let's try one more. In this case, I have a complementary angle. So I know these angles are going to add up to 90. If I did 65 minus 90, I will then get 25, and these two will add up to 180. This is a representation of vertical angles. They're across from each other, which means they're congruent. Go ahead and think about what do you think it is? If you said 35 in your head, you are correct. Remember, these are congruent because they're across from each other. Here we have a straight line again. What does it need to equal to? If you said 180, you are correct. If I do 50 minus 180, what's your answer? If you said 130, you are correct. Okay, this one again, straight line. So we're talking about supplementary angles. What do they add up to? If you said 180, you are correct. 140 minus 180 will give you 40. That's the missing angle. So what we really did with those is we're going to explore and be able to complete diagrams that are showing the different angles. In this case, if I was looking for the measurement of where is it? H, G, and I can say that it's 30 degrees because these two are vertical. As you can see here, these add up to 180. My line is super crooked. Wasn't working right. But if you look right here, this is a straight line. At least the black one is. And you add them together and they equal 180. Okay? So I want to skip over and notice when you have two parallel lines and a transversal, this line that cuts through the two parallels is called a transversal, and it creates angles here, 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 and here. And we are going to use our knowledge of supplementary and our knowledge of vertical angles to complete this diagram. In this case, I see my 63 here. I would know that I can write 63 right across because they're vertical. Well, how do I find my missing angle here? Well, for here, I can see that this is on a straight line. So I would take 180 and I would subtract 63 from it, and I would get 117. And one way to check it is always add them together and see if that adds up. If I know this is 117, then I know this is 117 here as well. One other thing I want to explain is if I were to cut this line, let's make a little dotted line right down the middle of parallels, each side would be congruent to the other. That means that if I were to cut this in half and land this on top of here, these angles would be congruent. This would be alternate interior angles right here, alternate exteriors. What's on the outside and what's on the inside. So if I landed this on top, my 63 would land here. And that's the easier way to look at it. My 117 would land here. You can start seeing what is corresponding. Same thing here, 117. So these diagrams are really easy to find the measurement of the angle as long as you have one. And you know that you are using supplementary and vertical angles to answer. One more time, supplementary is when you add them together and they equal 180. This added here will equal 180. This added here will equal 180. Angles across from each other are congruent because they're vertical as well. Okay, so just a quick check. If you're not done, pause it. I'm going to go ahead and show it. Across will be 108 because these are vertical angles, but across here is going to be 180. Across here is 108 and 72, and these add up to 180. But one thing I want you to notice here is if I cut this in half, like I did my perpendicular lines, they will give me two equal parts and they'll land up. But if you notice right here, they're not parallel. They're starting to close in. I see this line starting to get more narrow, and this area here is a lot wider. If they were parallel, these two lines would be the same length, but I can clearly see this is longer than this. Therefore, I have to find out the other measurements. I cannot just say this one matches this one and this one matches this one. I actually will have to do the math because they're not parallel lines. They're only equal on the top and the bottom if they're parallel. Well, that is the overview of lesson 14. There will be homework help later, just making sure that you're following supplementary and vertical angles. Good luck.